Hello, welcome back to this module on the relation between music, norms and values. Hopefully you have enjoyed the interview with Ton Koopman. Perhaps you have already reflected a bit on his thoughts. What did he say about the contribution music can have to ideas about ethics, about morality, about our way of engaging with people? And do you agree with Koopman? In this video we will look back to Koopman's thoughts and think further along the lines and concepts he has introduced. More concretely, I like to invite you to think about the concept of responsibility in relation to music making. I think that the most important message you could have distilled from the interview is that Koopman stresses the importance of respect for the composer and his music. And I use his here only because there are hardly any known female Baroque composers. In his performances, Koopman wants to come as close as possible to the composer's intentions, to what the composer had in mind. Especially when we are dealing with composers who are not alive anymore, composers to whom we cannot ask anymore how their music should be performed, we have the obligation to collect as much information as possible on how he wanted his music to be performed. Koopman calls this performing historically correct or informed. However, the question is if this is all we can say about the ethical relation a performer can and should have towards a deceased composer and his works. First, Koopman is of course also aware of the fact that having a perfect and complete picture of the past is impossible. The past is something which is constantly constructed and reconstructed. But this opens the possibility, also for musicians, to regard the past as a source of inspiration, rather than as a stable point to which they can and need to return. Second, a score doesn't always provide all the information needed to perform a piece of music. Especially in the case of early music, aspects such as tempo, articulation, dynamics, and even instrumentation are often unclear and unspecified. So perhaps it's time to reconsider the status of the score and to regard it as an opportunity, an invitation to make music. It is not a document that transmits the truth about what to play. In other words, one has to be careful with sealing off the past. Of course, musicians have a certain responsibility to respect the score and the composer's intentions, if they can be known. But a one-sided respect can also do injustice to the possibility to discover new ways of presenting music from the past. Another question that can be asked is why we should put all our cards on the composer's intentions. Usually, music philosophers make a sharp distinction between fidelity to the composer's intentions, being faithful to the original sounds of the music, and staying as close as possible to the performing practice of that time. If there is indeed a difference between these three, what about the performer's responsibility? To which of these three should he or she have to be faithful? But that's not all, and this brings me to the heart of the matter, to the heart of the relation between music making and ethics, to the idea of how performing music can contribute something to ethical reflections and moral behavior. As Koopman also mentions, very briefly, next to being faithful to the composer and the score, a performer also has his own personal integrity. A performer can or even should also be faithful to himself, to his feelings, to his own artistic integrity. Hence, we must also accept the possibility that the performer finds different ways of performing a piece than the way the composer had intended it. Said differently, pure faithfulness to the past and the original intentions, again, if we can reconstruct them at all, can also mean to avoid responsibility. Only hiding behind the back of the composer is in fact taking no responsibility for one's own musical acts and decisions. Being responsible for one's own aesthetic choices in music making is what I call artistic integrity. That requires creativity and originality. Recreating a piece of music from the past also means that one adds his own voice. And isn't that exactly what Koopman is doing too? He adds his own signature to the music he performs. An ethical and moral attitude towards music from the past implies not only the attempt to return to the original sources, but also to deal with them anew. True responsibility thus means working between being somehow faithful to the original sources and transmitting those sources on the one hand, and adding something to them on the other hand. Perhaps we could think of his music from the past as a gift. Thus, performers have a responsibility to what has been given to them. However, they don't own that gift, nor can they treat it as they please. They should listen carefully to that gift. But listening carefully not only means to repeat it, it means finding a balance between what the composer once made and the performer's own input. So, let me summarize. First, responsibility is more than mere fidelity. It also requires taking decisions about the way you want to perform specific music. Second, this typical musical ethics or morality could be called artistic integrity. In other words, artistic integrity has not only aesthetical dimensions, but also ethical ones. This video, as well as the interview with Koopman, dealt with the ethical issues that are operative in performing music. Other videos in this module pay more attention to the role of the listener in relation to values and norms. So, enjoy the next ones.